She walked out of the study holding the blood-stained envelope like a sacred prayer, her white apron glowing like a ghost in the dim hallway. 5 rifles were leveled at her chest, 5 fingers tightening on triggers, but CO Era didn't stop. She didn't even look at the barrels. She looked at the men behind them with the bored, terrifying patience of a woman who had already seen how they would die. The silence inside the Giamsa estate was more oppressive than any scream. It was the kind of expensive, heavy silence that lived in high-ceilinged hallways and polished mahogany. The kind CO Era had navigated for 3 years without ever leaving a footprint. Outside, the rain lashed against the reinforced glass of the master study. But inside, the only sound was the rhythmic, surgical clink of Era polishing silver while the man she served fought for his life behind a steel panic room door. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck midnight, the chimes muffled by the tactical boots of the men now swarming the house. For years, Era had been the girl who didn't exist, the one who emptied ashtrays while billion-dollar betrayals were whispered and scrubbed bloodstains from marble floors without asking whose they were. She had spent 2 years in the National Intelligence Service's logistics wing before a family disgrace forced her into the shadows of domestic service. They had seen her as furniture. They had seen her as a witness. They had never once seen her as the person who held the only key to the kingdom. The killers made their first mistake at 12:07 a.m. when they dismissed her entirely. Era watched from the servants' alcove as 5 armed men in tactical gear swept past her like she was wallpaper. Their leader, a square-jawed operative with fake Seoul Metro police credentials clipped to his vest, barked orders in Mandarin-accented Korean, coordinating the assault on the panic room with military precision. They had breaching charges, thermal scanners, cutting equipment worth more than Era's annual salary. What they didn't have was the slightest curiosity about the maid standing 3 feet away, holding a silver tea service that cost more than their combined weapons. She set the tray down with practiced invisibility and moved. The master study's door stood ajar, abandoned in the chaos. Through the gap, Era could see the wreckage of interrupted business, Scotch glasses still sweating on the desk, a cigar burning itself to ash in the crystal tray, the wall safe hanging open like a broken jaw. They'd already searched it, of course. Found the expected cash, the backup passports, the insurance policies. They'd taken photos, logged evidence, moved on to the real prize, trapped behind 3 inches of reinforced steel. They had no idea the safe had a false back. Era slipped inside and closed the door with the heel of her foot, her movements economical, measured. 3 years of service meant she knew every creak in the floorboards, every blind spot in the security cameras Director Kong had installed before the security upgrade last spring. She knew the cameras in this room had been offline for 6 days. Maintenance, officially. Convenience, actually, for a man who needed to move certain documents without his own organization watching. The safe's interior panel released with a soft click when she pressed the manufacturer's stamp twice, then once. The red ledger sat exactly where she'd last seen it when she brought Director Kong his afternoon tea, a blood-red leather envelope stamped with gold characters that translated roughly to promises kept. She'd watched him add entries to it every Thursday at 3 p.m., his fountain pen scratching names and numbers while she stood at attention with the Earl Grey growing cold on its tray. 37 pages, 42 names. Enough concentrated power to topple 3 governments and destroy 2 of Korea's largest chaebols. The envelope was sealed with wax, Director Kang's personal seal, pressed hours before the assault began. A single dark stain marked the center of the wax, deliberate and centered. His blood, mixed into the seal as a final signature that could never be forged or replicated. Only someone who knew what it meant would understand its significance. Era tucked it against her ribs beneath her apron, the leather still warm from the safe's interior. Outside the door, men shouted coordinates. Something metal screamed against metal. The panic room was holding, but it wouldn't hold forever. It didn't need to. She smoothed her apron, checked her reflection in the window's black glass. Pale face, steady hands, the perfect picture of a servant caught in circumstances beyond her understanding, and turned toward the door. Then she walked back into the hallway like a woman who had merely been tidying up, carrying in her hands the single piece of evidence that would decide who lived and who disappeared tonight. The hallway stretched before her like a gauntlet lined with death. Era stepped out of the master study at 12:19 a.m. The blood-red envelope held at chest level like an offering to gods who had long since stopped listening. The dim emergency lighting cast her white apron in spectral glow, turning her into something between servant and ghost. Behind her, the study door clicked shut with the finality of a coffin lid. 5 men materialized from the shadows. They moved with the synchronized efficiency of a firing squad. Rifles rising in unison, safeties clicking off in a staggered rhythm that sounded like bones breaking. Tactical vests, helmet-mounted cameras, faces obscured by balaclavas, and the kind of expensive night vision equipment that suggested this wasn't their first execution. They formed a loose semicircle, blocking her path to the grand staircase, their weapons tracking her center mass with the dead-eyed focus of professionals who'd done this enough times to stop counting. Era didn't stop walking. She didn't run, didn't freeze, didn't raise her hands in surrender, or drop to her knees in a universal language of please don't shoot. She walked with the same measured pace she'd used for 3 years when carrying tea trays and folded linens. 1 foot in front of the other, spine straight, eyes forward. The envelope remained steady in her grip, its single blood stain centered like a cardinal seal. The lead operative, the one with sergeant stripes on his tactical vest, shifted his weight. Stop! Hands up! Now! Era's gaze didn't waver. She looked past the rifle barrels, past the tactical gear, straight into the eyes behind the masks with the bored, terrifying patience of a woman who had already seen how this ended. Her expression carried no fear, no panic, no negotiation. Just the unsettling calm of someone who'd finished a task and was now simply delivering the results. She took another step. 3 laser sights converged on her sternum, painting her apron with trembling red dots. The men's breathing had changed. She could hear it even from 10 feet away. Shallow, uncertain, the kind of breathing that came when the script deviated and no one had prepared you for what happened next. I said stop. The sergeant's voice cracked on the second word. Era stopped, not because he'd ordered it, but because she'd reached the exact point she needed to be. 15 feet from the staircase, 12 feet from the nearest armed man, close enough that they could all see what she held, but far enough that instinct would keep them from firing without confirmation. She spoke for the first time since midnight, her voice carrying the surgical precision of someone reading a verdict. Director Kong sends his regards. Then she held the blood-stained envelope higher, tilting it just enough that the wax seal caught the light. The unmistakable personal mark of a man who should have been trapped and helpless behind reinforced steel. The rifles wavered. NCO Era smiled. The smile lasted exactly 3 seconds before Era spoke again. Seo Keen. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. The name alone landed like a blade between ribs. Or should I call you by your real name? The one Beijing still uses when they wire your offshore accounts. The lead operative's rifle dipped half an inch. Just half an inch, but in the language of armed men standing in formation, it might as well have been a confession. Era's gaze never left his face. August 2019. Busan Port Authority. 17 containers of restricted medical equipment that should have been logged and destroyed. She tilted her head, the gesture almost curious. Instead, they disappeared into a warehouse registered to a shell company in Macau. The same shell company that paid for your daughter's Harvard tuition last fall. Shut up. Han Suk-jin's voice came out strangled, desperate. She's lying. She's just. Container Manifest BH 7742. Era's tone remained surgically precise, The kind of calm that came from reading classified files in temperature-controlled archives. Signed off by Inspector Han Dong-woo. Your father. Dead now, conveniently, before the investigation could reach him. But the money didn't stop flowing, did it? The man to Han's left, Young Tae-won, judging by the way he'd positioned himself as second in command, took a half step back. His rifle swung slightly, no longer aimed at Era, but angled toward the space between her and his team leader. The mathematics of betrayal calculating in real time. She's trying to divide us. Han's words came faster now, sharper. Standard interrogation tactic. Don't listen to. Director Kong knows. Era interrupted with the casual finality of someone stating the weather. He's known for 8 months. Every Thursday at 3 p.m., when I brought him tea, he was building the file. Every name, every transaction, every lie you told the people standing beside you right now. She shifted her grip on the envelope, and 4 sets of eyes tracked the movement. The blood stains seemed darker now, more deliberate, like it had been waiting for this exact moment to matter. The question isn't whether Han Suk-jin is compromised. Era's voice dropped to something almost intimate, a secret shared between old friends. The question is who else in this hallway is on Beijing's payroll. Because Director Kang's ledger lists 3 names from your team. The silence that followed had teeth. Young Tae-won's rifle barrel drifted another degree toward Han. Oh Min-suk shifted his weight, his finger moving away from the trigger guard as his attention pivoted from the maid to his teammates. Even Kwon Dae-shik and Baek Junho had gone rigid, their tactical formation fracturing into something more primal. The mathematics of who would shoot first and who would be left standing. Han Suk-jin's voice shook when he finally spoke. Don't believe her. She's just a maid. She doesn't know anything. Era smiled again, and this time it reached her eyes. I polish the silver while you whisper your secrets. I empty ashtrays full of your mistakes. I scrub your blood from marble floors. She paused, letting each word settle like stones on a grave. What makes you think I'm just anything? The lights died at 12:24 a.m., and with them, the illusion of control. Era's hand had never left the envelope. Her other hand had been resting against the hallway's mahogany paneling for the last 30 seconds, fingers pressed to a section of wood grain that looked identical to every other section, except for the recessed pressure plate hidden beneath 3 layers of varnish. Director Kong had shown it to her 6 months ago, the same day he'd asked her to memorize the estate's emergency protocols. Just in case, he'd said. Just in case everything goes wrong. She pressed once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The emergency lighting died first, plunging the hallway into absolute darkness. Then the backup generators, the security panels, even the soft blue glow of the tactical team's helmet-mounted cameras. The GMSA estate had cost $17 million to build and another $3 million to outfit with redundancies. All of it gone in the span of a single heartbeat. Someone's night vision goggles made a high-pitched electronic whine as they failed. What the? Young Tae-won's voice cut off mid-curse. In the darkness, Era heard the distinctive click of a rifle being raised, then the heavier sound of someone backing into the wall, disoriented. She moved. 3 years of navigating these halls in the dark, carrying tea at dawn before the household woke, checking locks at midnight after everyone slept, had taught her every floorboard that creaked, every corner that caught the light. She knew the servants' passage behind the east wall opened with a twist to the sconce bracket. Knew the gallery overlooking the foyer had 17 steps, not 16, and the last one sat 3 inches lower than the rest. Knew that the hallway they stood in bent left exactly 42 feet from a study door, where an antique credenza created a blind spot large enough to disappear into. Stay together. Han Suk-jin's voice had lost its military precision, fraying into something raw. Eyes on the maid. Where's the... A sound cut through the darkness. Not loud, but distinct. The soft hydraulic hiss of a door opening somewhere above them. Then another to their left. Then a third behind them. the estate's automated systems failing in sequence, unlocking every passage Era had mapped during her years of invisible service. She's moving. Oh Min Suk's voice was tight with the kind of fear that came from realizing the rules had changed. I can't hear. North wall. I think she's... Another sound. This one closer. The whisper of fabric against wood paneling, except it came from the opposite direction, from somewhere near the grand staircase where no one should be able to move that quietly, that quickly. Era's voice drifted from the darkness, impossible to pinpoint, her words echoing off mahogany and marble until they seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I know every blind spot in this house, every camera, every exit. A pause, measured and deliberate. Director Kong taught me the blackout protocol for situations exactly like this. When the prey needs to become the hunter. A rifle discharged, a single panicked shot that punched into the ceiling, showering the darkness with plaster dust. Someone shouted. Someone else cursed in Mandarin. And in the absolute darkness of the Jiamsa estate, Seo, Era smiled. The emergency lighting flickered back to life at 12:31 a.m., bathing the hallway in sickly red. 5 men stood in a broken formation, rifles sweeping the shadows, their tactical discipline shattered by 7 minutes of hunting something they couldn't see. Han Suk-jin had plastered dust in his hair. Young Tae-won's knuckles were bleeding from where he'd slammed into a door frame. Kwon Dae-shik's rifle was pointed at Baek Junho's chest, neither man willing to lower their weapon first. Era stood exactly where she'd been before the lights died, centered in the hallway, the blood-stained envelope still held at chest level, her white apron immaculate. She hadn't moved at all, or she'd moved through every shadow in the estate and returned before the red emergency lights revealed her absence. The men's faces suggested they couldn't decide which possibility terrified them more. You're going to listen now. Era's voice carried the finality of a door closing, because the next part determines whether any of you leave this building alive. Han Suk-jin's rifle snapped back toward her, but his hands were shaking. We have guns. We have. You have 7 minutes and 40 seconds before the building incinerates. Era's expression didn't change. That's how long the biological failsafe gives you. After that, the estate's emergency protocol activates. Thermite charges in the foundation. White phosphorus in the walls. Everything burns hot enough to turn bone to ash and steel to slag. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Oh Min Suk's voice came out hoarse. You're blowing up the house. I'm not doing anything. Era tilted the envelope, letting the emergency light catch the dark stain on the wax seal. Director Kong did. 3 months ago, when he had his doctor install a biometric monitor in my chest during what I was told was a routine medical examination. She touched her sternum with her free hand, the gesture almost delicate. The blood on this envelope isn't just Director Kang's signature. It's keyed to my biosignature, my heart rate, my respiratory pattern. As long as I'm alive and calm, the envelope remains stable. Her gaze moved across each man's face with surgical precision. The moment my heart stops, whether from a bullet or simple fear, the oxidizing agent in the wax activates. 30 seconds later, the charges detonate. That's insane. Young Tae-won's voice cracked. No one would. Director Kong built his empire by ensuring his enemies had no winning move. Era's tone suggested she was explaining something obvious to a particularly slow child. You came here to extract information, to leverage his secrets. Instead, you're standing in a building wired to incinerate evidence, holding guns you can't fire, facing a woman you can't threaten. She took a step forward. 5 rifles tracked her movement, but no one fired. So here's what happens next. Era's smile was glacial precise. You're going to put down your weapons. You're going to kneel. And you're going to pray that Director Kong decides you're more useful alive than dead. The grandfather clock in the foyer began to chime. 12:30. 7 minutes remaining. The first rifle hit the floor at 12:33 a.m. Baek Junho dropped his weapon with the resignation of a man who'd done the mathematics and found no path to survival. He raised his hands slowly, fingers spread, eyes locked on Era like she was a bomb that might detonate if he breathed wrong. Smart. Era's voice was silk over steel. For minutes, 30 seconds. The rest of you should consider following his example. Ansog jinisa zhao glansha. We don't take orders from Young Tae-won. Era's gaze shifted left. Did Han tell you about the Busan port investigation? Or did he let you walk into this operation blind, with a team leader already compromised? Young's rifle barrel drifted an inch toward his commander. She's manipulating us. Han's voice rose, desperate. Can't you see what she's? Min-suk. Era continued as if Han hadn't spoken. The offshore account in Manila. The one that received transfers every month from the same Macau shell company. Tell me, does your wife know where that money comes from? Or does she think you're still working legitimate security contracts? Min-suk's face went white. His finger slipped away from the trigger. Lies. Han was shouting now. All of it lies. We came here as a unit. We leave as a Kwon Daeshik. Era's voice dropped to something almost intimate. Your daughter, the one in the hospital in Incheon. Stage 4, isn't it? How much does that treatment cost? More than your salary covers, certainly. Kwon's breathing had gone shallow, ragged. His rifle wavered. Director Kong offers excellent medical benefits. Era tilted her head, the gesture surgical in its precision. To people who prove themselves useful. To people who make the right choice in the next 3 minutes and 40 seconds. The second rifle clattered to the marble floor. Kwon, what are you? Han spun toward his teammate, and that's when Young Tae-won moved. His rifle came up fast, professional, centering on Han's chest instead of Era's. Drop it. Young's voice was flat, emotionless. Drop your weapon. Now. You're choosing her over. I'm choosing to not die in a building fire because our team leader's been on foreign payroll for 3 years. Young's finger rested on the trigger. Last chance. Han Suk-jin looked around the hallway, at Baek Junho with his hands raised, at Kwon Daeshik backing away, at Min-suk whose rifle now pointed at the floor. The tactical unit that had swept through the Gyeomsa estate with military precision had fractured into 5 individuals, each calculating their own odds of survival. His rifle joined the others on the floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the expensive silence. On your knees. Era's command was quiet, absolute. All of you. Hands behind your heads. One by one, they knelt. Professional killers reduced to supplicants, their fate now held in the hands of a woman in a maid's uniform who'd never once raised her voice or touched a weapon. The grandfather clock chimed again. 12:35. 2 minutes remained. But CO Era's heart rate never changed. The panic room door opened at 12:37 a.m. with a pneumatic hiss of a vault unsealing. Kong Jae-sung stepped into the hallway like a man returning from the dead. He was in shirt sleeves, the expensive fabric marked with sweat and dust, his tie loosened but still precise. Blood stained his left cuff, not his own, judging by the steadiness of his movements. His eyes swept the scene with the cold calculation of a man who'd built an empire by reading rooms faster than other men could draw weapons. 5 armed men on their knees. Rifles scattered across marble flooring. His maid standing at the center of it all, holding nothing but a blood-stained envelope and a silver letter opener she'd apparently retrieved from the study's desk while no one was watching. The letter opener's tip rested against Han Suk-jin's carotid artery with surgical precision. Director Kong. Era's voice carried no relief, no surprise, just the measured acknowledgement of a task completed. Your timing is impeccable. Jae-sung's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile on a different man's face. I taught you that trick with the blackout protocol 6 months ago. I was curious whether you'd remember. I remember everything you've taught me. Era's grip on the letter opener remained steady, the blade pressing just hard enough to leave an indentation in Han's skin without breaking it. including what to do with compromised assets. Jae-sung moved down the hallway with the unhurried confidence of a man who knew every weapon in the building was either on the floor or in his control. He stopped beside Young Ta-won, studying the tactical gear, the helmet-mounted cameras, the professional-grade equipment. Impressive. His voice carried the detached appreciation of a man evaluating a fine wine. Someone spent considerable money on this operation. Beijing, I assume, based on the equipment specifications. Han Suk-jin sold the access codes. Era's tone suggested she was reading from a grocery list. Young Tae-won provided the floor plans. Oh Min-suk disabled the perimeter alarms. They were promised $10 million in immunity if they delivered you alive. And the other two? Jae-sung gestured toward Kwon Dae-shik and Baek Jun-ho. Collateral. Era's gaze never left Han's face. Hired help who didn't know the operation was already compromised. Kwon has a sick daughter. Baek has gambling debts in Macau. Both were desperate enough to not ask questions. Jae-sung crouched before Han Suk-jin, meeting his eyes with the bored patience of a man who'd conducted this conversation 100 times before. 3 years. You've been on Beijing's payroll for 3 years, and you thought I wouldn't notice? Han said nothing. The mathematics of survival had already told him silence was his only remaining option. I noticed the day you opened the offshore account. Jae-sung's voice was conversational, almost kind. I just wanted to see how far you'd go. Who you'd compromise. What you'd sacrifice. He straightened, brushing dust from his trousers. Thank you for the comprehensive demonstration. He looked at Era, and something passed between them. Recognition, respect, the wordless communication of people who played a long game and won. The envelope? He asked. Era held it out. The red ledger. Intact. And the biological failsafe. Her smile was surgical, precise. Never existed. But they didn't need to know that. The maid's uniform burned at 3:47 a.m., reduced to ash in the study's marble fireplace. Era watched the white apron curl and blacken. The fabric that had made her invisible for 3 years consumed by flames that cast dancing shadows across mahogany walls. The blood-stained envelope sat on the desk behind her, its wax seal broken, its contents now transferred to encrypted servers in 7 countries. The 5 men who'd come to destroy Director Kong had been processed with clinical efficiency. 3 transferred to holding facilities, 2 released with new employment contracts that came with very specific terms. You should have told me. Jae-sung stood beside her, his own reflection ghosting across the window's black glass. About the intelligence training. About what you were before the family disgrace. You never asked. Era's tone was neutral. You saw a maid who needed work. I saw an opportunity to disappear. And now I stopped disappearing. The suit had been waiting in her quarters, tailored black wool, Italian cut, the kind of precision tailoring that cost more than 6 months of her former salary. She dressed in silence, trading the uniform of invisibility for the armor of authority. When she'd walked into the conference room at dawn, 3 of Jae-sung's senior advisors had stood automatically, the gesture of respect unconscious, instinctive. She sat at the head of the table now, the position traditionally reserved for the director's most trusted lieutenant. Jae-sung had taken the seat to her right, a statement that every person in the organization would spend the next week interpreting. The red ledger. One of the advisors, Park Min-jae, the financial controller, spoke carefully. With that kind of leverage, we could burn it all. Era's interruption was quiet, absolute. Every name, every transaction, every piece of evidence that ties us to 3 governments and 42 compromised officials. The room went silent. Or, she continued, we could use it the way Director Kong intended. Not as a weapon, but as insurance. A guarantee that our business remains our business. And the people who owe us favors remember why they sleep safely at night. She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes with the same calm she'd used facing 5 rifles in a darkened hallway. For 3 years, I was invisible, unthreatening. The girl who emptied ashtrays and scrubbed floors and listened to secrets that men thought I was too insignificant to understand. Her voice carried surgical precision. That invisibility was the most valuable asset this organization possessed. Because while you were all watching each other for signs of betrayal, I was watching everyone. Jae-sung's smile was genuine this time. The National Intelligence Service trained you well. They trained me to gather information. Era's gaze returned to the window, to the dawn breaking over Seoul's skyline. Director Kong trained me to use it. She thought about the maid's uniform, now ash in the fireplace. About 3 years of being furniture, being ignored, being underestimated by every person who'd walked past her without a second glance. The old order worked because people feared Director Kang's power. She turned back to the table. The new order will work because they'll never see us coming. In the marble fireplace, the last threads of white fabric crumbled to nothing, and Era, no longer a maid, no longer invisible, no longer unthreatening, began building an empire from the ashes of her old life.